Welcome to a tale that sounds like it's straight out of a comedy sketch, but is, in fact, a bizarre chapter in Australian history, the Great Emu War. Picture this. It's the early 1930s, and Australia is grappling with the aftermath of World War I, facing economic challenges and a struggling agricultural sector. Amidst this backdrop, a peculiar problem arises. An invasion of emus. Yes, those large flightless birds that seem to waddle through life without a care in the world. Now you might be wondering how a bunch of soldiers ended up in a war against birds. Well, the farmers in Western Australia were desperate. These emus were wreaking havoc on crops, and the government decided to intervene. Enter the soldiers, armed with machine guns, ready to take on their feathered foes. It's a scenario that sounds absurd, and it is. The clash between men and emus is not just a quirky footnote in history, it's a reminder of how sometimes the most serious situations can lead to the most ridiculous outcomes. In this video, we'll dive into the details of this lesser-known story, exploring the unique blend of military strategy and avian antics. Get ready for a humorous yet informative journey through the Great Emu War, where the only thing more stubborn than the soldiers was the flock of emus they were trying to outsmart. To truly understand the Great Emu War, we need to take a step back into the post-World War I era in Australia. The country was grappling with the economic fallout from the war, and many veterans returned home to find limited job opportunities. Agriculture, which had been a backbone of the economy, was struggling to keep up with the demands of a growing population and the challenges posed by the Great Depression. Farmers were already facing hardships, and then came an unexpected adversary, emus. These large, flightless birds began to flock into farmland in Western Australia, drawn by the abundance of crops. With their insatiable appetites, emus quickly became a nuisance, trampling fields and devouring grain. Farmers found themselves in a desperate situation, battling not just the economic pressures of the time, but also these feathered invaders that seemed to have no regard for their hard work. The emus were not just a minor inconvenience, they were a significant threat to the livelihoods of many. In response to the escalating crisis, the Australian government decided to intervene. They recognized that the situation had reached a point where military action was necessary. Thus, they formed a military effort to combat the emu invasion, leading to the infamous and somewhat comical conflict that would come to be known as the Great Emu War. This decision marked the beginning of a unique chapter in Australian history, where soldiers would face off against a flock of determined birds. When the Australian government decided to tackle the emu invasion, they deployed soldiers from the Royal Australian Artillery to Western Australia, armed and ready for battle. The initial strategy was straightforward: use military might to outsmart and outgun the emus. Soldiers set up machine guns in strategic locations, hoping to create a perimeter that would contain the birds and allow for a swift takedown. It sounded like a solid plan on paper, but reality had other ideas. As the soldiers took their positions, they quickly discovered that emus were not your average adversaries. These birds were surprisingly agile and adept at evading capture. The soldiers found themselves in a comical game of cat and mouse, with the emus darting in all directions, often leaving the troops bewildered and frustrated. The military equipment, including the machine guns, proved to be less effective than anticipated. The emus would scatter at the first sign of danger, making it difficult for the soldiers to get a clear shot. The absurdity of the situation was not lost on anyone involved. Here were trained soldiers, accustomed to facing human foes, now engaged in a bizarre battle against a flock of flightless birds. The image of men in uniform, armed to the teeth, chasing after emus was both humorous and surreal. As the days turned into weeks, it became increasingly clear that this was not just a military operation. It was a quirky episode in history that would leave everyone scratching their heads and laughing at the sheer ridiculousness of it all. As the Great Emu War unfolded, one thing became abundantly clear. Emus are remarkably resilient creatures. Despite the military's best efforts, these flightless birds showcased an uncanny ability to evade the soldiers' tactics and adapt to the chaos around them. With their long legs and surprising speed, emus could zigzag away from danger, leaving the soldiers scratching their heads in disbelief. One particularly memorable encounter involved a group of soldiers who set up an ambush near a water source, anticipating that the emus would flock there to drink. As the soldiers lay in wait, they watched in frustration as the emus approached, only to suddenly change direction at the last moment, darting off into the bush. It was as if the birds had a sixth sense, sensing the soldiers' presence and outsmarting them at every turn. Another anecdote tells of a soldier who, after a long day of chasing emus, finally managed to get a clear shot at one. Just as he pulled the trigger, the emu stumbled, causing the bullet to miss entirely. The soldier couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation, realizing that he was being outwitted by a bird that seemed to have a knack for comedic timing. The humor in these encounters was not lost on the soldiers, who found themselves in a surreal battle against creatures that seemed to revel in their ability to outsmart trained military personnel. The emus became not just a nuisance, but a source of laughter and disbelief, proving that sometimes the underdog, or in this case the underbird, can triumph in the most unexpected ways. The Great Emu War quickly captured the attention of the Australian public, and media coverage of the military's efforts was both extensive and often humorous. Newspapers of the time reported on the bizarre conflict with a mix of incredulity and amusement, showcasing headlines that highlighted the absurdity of soldiers battling flightless birds. As stories of the emu's resilience and the soldiers' struggles circulated, public perception shifted from concern for the farmers to outright ridicule of the military's approach. This unusual conflict became a source of humor, with many Australians finding it hard to take the situation seriously. Jokes and anecdotes about the emus outsmarting trained soldiers spread like wildfire, turning the Great Emu War into a national punchline. People began to see the emus not just as pests, but as clever adversaries, leading to a cultural phenomenon where the birds were celebrated for their unexpected triumphs over military might. The lasting cultural impact of the Great Emu War can still be felt in Australian society today. The event has become a quirky reference point in discussions about military operations and wildlife management. It serves as a reminder of the sometimes absurd nature of human endeavours, especially when faced with the unpredictability of nature. The emus have even found their way into popular culture, appearing in jokes, cartoons and social media memes, ensuring that this peculiar chapter in history remains alive in the collective memory of Australians. The Great Emu War stands as a testament to the humour that can arise from even the most serious situations, reminding us all to find laughter in the unexpected. As we wrap up our exploration of the Great Emu War, it's clear that this peculiar chapter in Australian history is both humorous and significant. We've seen how the post-World War I era set the stage for farmers struggling against an unexpected foe, the emus. The military's involvement, complete with machine guns and strategic plans, turned into a comical saga of soldiers chasing agile birds that seemed to have a knack for evasion. The resilience of the emus, coupled with the absurdity of the situation, transformed what could have been a serious agricultural crisis into a national joke. This event serves as a reminder of how sometimes the most serious situations can lead to the most ridiculous outcomes. It encourages us to reflect on the absurdity of life and the unexpected challenges we face, even when they come in the form of flightless birds. The Great Emu War has left a lasting cultural impact, reminding us that humor can be found in the most unlikely places. If you enjoyed this dive into one of history's quirkiest conflicts, we invite you to subscribe to our channel for more intriguing stories. Don't forget to like and share this video with your friends, so they too can appreciate the hilarity and significance of the Great Emu War. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to bringing you more fascinating tales from history.